of the United States. Read that Constitution.
Okay.
You're creating a designation under trust as a foreign national. Doesn't matter if you're from Haiti or what. You're not from these lands. You're not from this construct.
Okay. Right. Okay.
You're not from this government. What government are you from? How, and how do you get to that government that you say that you're from?
Okay.
Okay. It's by blood. It's by heritage.
Oh.
Yes, you make the claims through your trust. Everything is back to the trust. Everything is back to the trust. When you establish your trust, you mentioned police. When you establish your trust, you place all your property under the trust. Cars, home, everything. Once you place your home under the trust, you also do a reassignment so that you remove the trustee that's sitting on your property in your deed, in your whole transaction. And when you remove the trustee and reassign your tribe as the trustee, the tribe's never going to agree to sell your property, and that's the only way that banks can sell the property. They need the trustee to sell it. Did I just tell you something?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And that's anybody in this country can go and fire the trustee and hire their sister or brother as the trustee, and the bank cannot touch the property because they need the trustee's permission to sell or foreclose.
Okay.
I know that was kind of off topic, but I knew
that was
to throw that out there.
Because that was one of the things, actually, one of the questions that was
now we're talking about that same position of power. When you place your vehicle under your trust, then now the trust owns your vehicle. So you have to get new registration. And that registration is that your state of New York or wherever, you registered the vehicle. Who owns the vehicle? The trust.
The trust, right.
So the document says, Oklahoma Nation Trust owns this vehicle. They're going to issue that tag. Now you got to go get insurance. You're going to show the registration, whatever, to get insurance. You're going to show ID. You're going to show them your driver's license. That's what they're going to ask for.
Right.
The policy says you must show identification. The policy doesn't say that you have to show a driver's license. So see, when we do that, we're sheep. We'll ban our way on up into their jurisdiction. We have to ban our way out of their jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
So your trust is your new government, right? Government is responsible to what and to whom? The people. Oh, yes. So here you are, a citizen of this new government that and you just kick yourself out in the street to just navigate out here. Who are you? You got something you can show me? You have to create ID for your tribal members. So that's what you carry into the insurance office. Your tribal ID, that's who you are. And that's what the trust says that you are.
Are they obligated to
listen to me? Listen to me.
I'm listening.
They're obligated on the policy to accept identification.
Oh, okay.
Is that not identification?
That is true.
When he accepts that identification, he's going to enter it into his system as an international driver's license. Did you hear me stumble up on that?
I'm hearing you. I'm listening. I'm also hearing you.
Enters it into his system as an international driver's license. So when Johnny Law comes behind you, the first thing he's going to do is what? Run your tag. What is that tag going to come back as?
An international
tribe. Some kind of damn tribe.
Tribe, yeah. Right.
I'm Johnny Law, and I'm saying, oh, that's some kind of damn tribe. What are you doing? Let's see that word tribe stuck in his head. Because he's creeping out of his jurisdiction.
True.
Yeah, he's creeping out of his jurisdiction. He knows before he even stops you because he ran your tag. Now, when he runs your tag, it comes back Oklahoma Nation, and your name is also pops up in the system strangely. Why? Because you're operating on an international identification.
Okay.
So it has to be there. So now Johnny has to determine whether or not he's going to stop you for a non-crime or I'm not going to. Yeah. You don't look like a damn Indian. You look like But I'm going to keep on moving along.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is what we want. We want the encroachment to stop.
Right. Right.
So we have to create a different level of power for ourselves.
That's true. Yeah.
Black Lives Matter need to go home and find their colored birth certificates. And we can implement things at the international level.
Right. Right.
Where they can implement nothing except chaos and gunfire out there in the streets. But in the international venue, if we are more of us recognizing the international venue, we have power. We have power.
Okay. Numbers is power.
Yes.
All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. Some of the questions may seem a little bit redundant because those are kind of different people. All right. So the same sister, she asked, do we give up our privilege, or can we still function as a citizen of the United States, and not subjected to be shipped off somewhere else? Do we now go through naturalization because we are no longer claiming to be part of the corporation?
Naturalization is established by whom?
Well, based on my knowledge, I guess the government.
Which government? Yours?
Theirs.
Ah. SF1, this thing called SF-181 that people are using to change their identity. Who created that form? The federal government?
Yeah.
For their own people, for their own purposes? Why would the United States create a document to get rid of its property?
Okay.
To show its property, here's your way out.
Right.
You're going to cost me a lot of money, but here's your way out. SF-181. There's no logic. But we're so desperate to be free.
Right.
Well, it's here.
Okay.
It's here. It's within you. Establish the trust. Find the document. Or find a friend who has the document and love him to death, and he's going to adopt you, and you're protected.
Okay. So basically it starts with self.
It starts with self.
Right.
Identity.
Okay, and the last question from that sister is, how will that affect my children? I guess based on,
it won't.
it won't.
Who owns them? Who owns her children once she's done her trust?
Well, it would be her now. Okay.
So right now, anything that the United States does to her children, the United States has a right to do it.
Even without the trust?
The United States, without the trust, yes.
Okay.
Yes. The United States has every right to do to its citizens what it wants to do.
Because it's a private corporation.
Yes.
Of course. All right.
It's property.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. All right. So I'm going on to the next email, all right?
Yes.
Most of the birth certificates in my family don't state race, nationality, but my granddad says Negro. So what does that mean for us? What if we know our Native American indigenous, but we don't have documents that to prove that?
If you know it, claim it.
Oh, okay.
It's what we said from the beginning.
From the beginning, it's what you say who
Yes.
you are. Okay.
Yes.
Your identity.
The right to self-identify.
Okay. And next question, can you establish or prove your status through your siblings?
What does that mean?
It means that based on that question, like take for instance, I can't find my birth certificate, but that's my sister. She has hers, and she can prove that we're the same. That's possible. Okay, beautiful. All right, so this is done. Next email was, my daughter is receiving benefits from the state. How would that be? How would that be affecting her as a member of NAAIP? Would that affect the benefits that she's getting from the state? Would that stop? No. Oh, okay. How would that work?
We have some people that are members of NAAIP, members of tribes, and they can hardly wait to get that $800, $900 a month in food stamps. It's their choice. And as a foreign national, as an Aboriginal, an indigenous person, first of all, you've been subjected to apartheid. Apartheid conditions. We have to depend on the system in order to survive. Either we go to work at their jobs, ask them for specific benefits, or we don't exist. We start. They don't allow us to catch rainwater and plant and do that in a lot of areas. We have to have certain status and standing to do those things. As a dual citizen, what are the rights of each one of those citizens?
And when you say
one of those citizens has the right to get food stamps and Social Security, and by all means.
And when you say dual citizen, you are talking about you yourself as an international and part of the corporation as well. No.
See, upon my choice, I can choose to exercise the rights of U.S. citizens, and exercise all those privileges that they've given to U.S. citizens, which includes those benefits, food stamps, and those things.
Okay.
Or I can choose to live on my land and grow my own food and set up my own economic infrastructure and deal with international countries and businesses across the water. That's my choice.
So basically, one still has the choice to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to fill out an application, use my social to get a job.
I have a public side and a private side.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Under my trust, I can remain private for the rest of my life and never deal with this public side. Or I can deal with this public side. Or I can take my private side and manipulate it into the public side if I choose.
Okay, so if one do decide, okay, I'm gonna keep my job, would they still be entitled to pay the taxes on that other side?
On the side and the private side. Let me explain. Depends on who the company is. If you're working for McDonald's, you can work for McDonald's or any other company pretty much as an independent contractor, not to be taxed.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. As an independent contractor, you just simply have to request it.
Okay.
We have some tribal members that have taken jobs not as themselves, but as the entire tribe.
Oh, okay.
But this person is designated to perform the duties. Designated by the tribe, not by the federal government or the corporation that's hiring this person, but the authority is placed into the tribe.
Okay.
The contract that was offered to you, snatched away from you by the tribe, and the tribe is now talking to these people about this and saying, we're going to allow him to do this. See, that keeps those that he sends them. That keeps you within the private structure, so that you're not subjected to that public side.
Oh, okay.
If you choose.
If you choose, right?
Yes.
That makes sense. All right. Next question. Once becoming a member of NAAIP, is there a mechanism through your system where she can retain her current benefits? You know, if we just choose to be nationals.
One side belongs to one side, and the other side belongs to the other. And you can't. You have to be a smooth operator to know how to pull one side from the other without committing fraud. You don't want to commit fraud. You don't want to perform any type of slickery.
Right.
You want to be straight about every single move that you're making.
Okay.
You have rights that are afforded you as a citizen, and you can exercise those rights.
Okay.
You have to know how to keep those things from coming into contact.
Kind of balance.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. So, but I just want to make sure that that she's clear on this. So basically, what she's really saying is this, right? Does NAAIP have a system in place? Take, for instance, if we come out of her, so to speak, does NAAIP have a system where, okay, we could, you know what, we have jobs for the people, we have certain benefits for the people. We are not at that point just yet, right?
NAAIP has established now 10 Chamber of Commerce institutions across the country owned by Aborigines.
Okay.
Chamber of Commerce, entertaining international business strictly for Aborigines.
Okay.
We're not there yet. We're just beginning to
Right.
put these things in motion. for those of you out there that I'm looking at that don't want to be patient, you can get off your ass and you can come help us.
Yeah, exactly.
We will allow you an opportunity to help us. But it's your ass that you have to get up off of, because we're working.
You guys heard that, right? Get up your ass. Get off that ass. All right, next question. How does adoption by a tribe work, since my heritage is Trinidadian, but my daughter is considered African American, and I am her legal guardian?
The child is the child of this land?
She was born here yet?
No. Of this land.
No, well, if I understand the question, I would say no, because the mother is Trinidadian. So.
And the father?
I think the father is also West Indian. I think.
So they're not of this land.
Not of the land. Right. Okay.
Yes. And the claims that they would make would have to be specific to the country and the villages that they're from.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes. You'd have a million angry Aborigines running, trying to kill you for taking their rights and taking their land.
Okay.
This is what our people experience when we are told to travel to the continent called Africa. And we go over there and we have this illusion that we are going home, and the people there recognize that we have no place called home there on their lands, and we get killed. There are hundreds of so-called immigrants that have left here that are being murdered because they're going over there and claiming those people's lands. So it's a nice thought and a nice concept, but Nigeria belongs to Nigerians.
Right.
Ethiopia belongs to Ethiopians. We don't belong there.
Okay.
But because we have this skin, we're tricked into running, yes, and buying, facilitating all sorts of things for people that we believe are going to embrace us. But then we find it, no, they're not going to let us claim their lands.
So is it possible, so would it be possible, though, for the tribe to adopt her in her situation?
Without any doubt.
Okay.
Without any doubt.
And then she would be...
And as a member of NAAIP, because we are an indigenous institution, you are in position to parlay with groups across the country.
Okay.
Go to their powwows. Introduce yourself. Become brothers and sisters within...
And not feel alienated just because you of the land of Trinidad and not of the land of...
One of the first things that we said, and it's in the presentation that we sent to all new prospective members, it's the PowerPoint presentation on identity. If you look at that presentation, it tells you what an Indian is. An Indian is not one that we say is Indian, but if he's recognized in his community, I'm sorry he came from China, but if he's recognized in his community as Indian, then you got Tonto standing here, and he's an Indian, and he has rights. It's really that simple.
Okay.
Because they have no authority in law to do the things that they're doing, saying that we are this or we are that. We have that right.
Okay.
But only when we are not U.S. citizens. See, we have to establish that other place to be.
Right. Okay, I see what you're
And
saying.
then throw finger signs from across the street, from a protected place in our own trust.
True.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes.
How are we doing on time, brother? We got some time? All right, beautiful. Next question. I currently reside in NYC. If I want to move closer where NAAIP and a tribe operate or live, what assistance would there be to help us make that move? Basically, what people are really asking is, they're under the like you said before, they think that NAAIP is a tribe.
It's a nation, yes.
You see, so it's kind of somewhere. And this is where we have to go and everybody live in Kumbaya and then we build, because I'm not going to lie, I thought that first.
Now,
see what I'm saying? And I'm keeping it real.
Now, let me expand. NAAIP has filed a claim against the Commerce Department. We have, as a part of the mechanism that we're putting in place and things that we've put in place
Mm-hmm.
to be allotted provisions of land.
Okay.
And in being provided land from this 2 million acres that the president has set aside, 500,000 or whatever it is, and now you have the place to build that type of structure,
so to speak. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Not nation, but a place where nations exist.
Okay.
Exactly. A protected, recognized area where tribes and nations exist, because we're not all from the same tribe.
True.
We're not all from period. That as members of NAAIP.
Okay.
And it's not NAAIP's responsibility or function to operate as a nation base.
Okay.
But at some point, I have no doubt that we will be involved in the facilitation of the necessary benefits to those petitioners that have come on board as members of NAAIP.
Okay.
And the infrastructure that has to be put in place is massive. And I'm not in a position today to say that I'm capable of doing such a thing. So it will take necessary resources to put those type of mechanisms in place to where we can say we have this allotted land, we're going to build these infrastructures to put these things in place, these housings in place, these farms in place, those types of mechanisms that have to be put in place, and this is why the claim was made, so that we could be repatriated to our natural place. Okay. And that takes money, it takes land, and if I can't see, truly speaking, these things have to be done, because you're talking about potentially millions of dollars being placed into individuals' hands, and they've never had this before, and they don't know what to do with it. You understand? Right. So the mechanisms have to be negotiated with the agencies that are providing the necessary resources, and also the membership will have to have some form of involvement as to certain decision mechanisms and whatnot. So we're just beginning, and we don't know where it's going to end. We don't know how many people are going to come forward between now and our September trip. When we make our September trip, the doors close on the settlement claim. And what I'm speaking about right now is the settlement, because that's where the funding will come from. It will come from the settlement claim, and the land will come from settlement claim. And will be benefited strictly to the petitioners of the settlement of that particular commerce document. Okay. Yeah.
So we have another email. What paperwork would I need to submit to my employers and Division of Motor Status has been updated?
That's the video.
Okay. All right.
The trust is the only way.
The trust is the only way. Okay. If the tribe is listed as a 501c corp and controlled by the state, what right can we have for protections other than NAAIP? Same thing, the trust, right? Okay, the trust. It goes back to the trust. All right? Next question. Once connected to a tribe,
Thank you so much for the safe space, and I'm going to now trust you on that.
Okay.
My question is about race, and it's about labeling. We like to label. And when I meet someone who is of African descent, African American, I will refer to them as African American. But if it's a friend that I've known for a while, I will call him and I will refer to him as black. So, am I overly sensitive or am I appropriate?
African American, we're not from Africa. We're not from Africa.
Africa is not our home. let that hang in the atmosphere for a while. I said at this gathering of the masters, Africa is not your home.
I'm an American. I'm not an African American. I'm an American.
I mean, you're going to get a lot of flack for saying you're not African American. You know that, right?
What do you think, Morgan? Is this political correctness gone too far?
Yeah. I mean, we have a tendency to do that anyway. I mean, you get politically correct stuff happens that you don't want to happen. I all of a sudden became an African. Correctness, African American. I'm not African. I'm not African. I'm not African.
You're black. And what does that mean? Well, I use the word black, and I use that too loosely, because I don't like the word.
What's a good word? The shall.
No, I am. You call me Negro, you call me nigger, you call me colored boy, you call me black, you call me African. I'm not an African.
For well over 500 years, dating back to the 13th century, as historically recorded across the world, indigenous Aboriginal Niji of Turtle Island were called a variety of derogative terms by visitors, exchangers, colonists, traders, and settlers, mainly due to outsiders being unfamiliar with all of the indigenous Niji's multiple native languages. So they would base their comedic name-calling by the shade of the Niji skin tone, and not the actual color of their complexion. During the mid-1500s and well into the 1600s, while the trade of tobacco, corn, rice, and the enslavement of some of the indigenous Niji were already in progress, Spaniard colonists of Portugal were colonizing lands in Southeast and Southwest Africa, while simultaneously colonizing nearly all of South America and southern geographical locations of North America. According to archived records and documents by Spain, during this time period, many of the Spanish colonists dubbed the indigenous Niji as Negroes and Negras, based solely on their genders and the shade of their skin tones, and not their domicile of origins. For example, the English settler John Roth was primarily responsible for documenting and delivering tobacco from the colony of Virginia to the Virginia Company of London by original orders from then King James I of England. Having the ability to speak Latin, English, and Spanish, he was able to create what he called, quote, a milder smoke by purchasing tobacco seeds from some of the Spanish colonists having settled in Florida, and from some of the indigenous Aborigines of Florida, the West Indies, and parts of Venezuela and Bermuda. In John Ross' journal, currently located in full at the National Archives facilities in London, he documented the round-trip shipments of the tobacco, silver and gold, and the famously known quote, 20 and odd Negras, which was changed by the Department of Historic Resources of Virginia 3 times, from 20 and odd Negras to 20 and odd Negroes, to now officially read today as 20 and odd Africans, commencing in 1992. What is very important to note is that the Spanish called the Africans Negras and Negroes as well, due to the shades of their skin tone. Having been, these 20 and odd Negras were captured by Captain John Jope and his crew aboard the British-built warship called the Treasure War, directly from the San Juan Bautista, which was the much larger Spanish-owned sailboat that deported from Angola in Southwest Africa, attempting to make its way to Vera Cruz. Now, I shared more information concerning this topic in both documentaries called The Untold Truth about the African slave trade, but I mentioned all of this to share some of the history of the complexity surrounding the multiple derogative terms that were used to label the indigenous Aborigines of America. So now you can understand the confusion that was designed through the format of eugenics. to make it seem as if the Africans and the indigenous Niji, or rather the indigenous people of Turtle Island, which is now known as North America, are one and the same when they're not. And this is where the mistake stimulated from. In the year of 1790 and beyond, census enumerators allegedly went from town to town, city to city, and door to door, deciding who was of what race and documented their families they meet as such. These unsupervised federal employees had a mammoth amount of influence on indigenous Aborigines genealogy records still to this very day. In fact, what the census takers informally documented on a sheet of paper was literally based on their mere individual opinions, and then later deemed as official records that were sacrosanct, leading to hundreds of years of the census takers' ideas of race being considered as official historical records of information throughout America. What's very important to note is that these census takers were provided instructions, and they recorded the ethnic category of various family members based on their perception of the family when they visited. So, if you are attempting to find and interpret data about your family's history, these results can be confusing, especially if one census they are deemed as all other free, or slaves, or free persons of color, or mulatto, and even black. In most early census years, there were no categories for Indian at all, while in others, free people of color were recorded all in one group. More about this in my documentary called The Untold Truth About the Classifications of Race, but I said all of that to say this. Where your family fell into a race classification category was solely up to the individual census taker of that particular area, not your family members. The term Negro and colored stuck around throughout the years of forced colonization, and especially when copper-colored indentured servants were cultivating the industrial design and capitalist societies of America between the late 1400s and the early 1900s. Now, since the distribution of slaves made the wealthiest profit more than selling any resources during the 15th and 16th centuries, slavery became the biggest business across the world, where they were called Negroes or coloreds by the English and the Spanish for decades until around the late 1950s and early 60s. The term black gradually made its mark within the copper-colored communities once they were granted privileges to vote during an election and promised civil rights commencing during the 1960s. But now, let's not forget about the early 1900s uprising of the book denominations.
This secret society, this particular black secret society that we'll talk about today, is the first of the black Greek societies. Started in 1904, and that word that you said, boule, is actually an acronym. It's a Sigma Pi Phi. Sigma Pi Phi, 1904 in Philadelphia. And for most of our people, we are not prepped to the responsibility of secret society in the American society. And this founding constitution, this illegal criminal enterprise, was a Masonic affair. And a Masonry is a form of secret society. There are other well-known secret societies like Skull and Bones at Yale, of which this corrupt president and his father were members of. And it is that society that the black society modeled itself after. So when they wrote their first history book, The History of Sigma Pi Phi, by a very noted black author, University President Charles Wesley, who wrote the history book for the Elks, the Prince Hall Masons, National Council of Negro Women, Alpha Phi Alpha, and Sigma Pi Phi. And as a result, in there, in page 28 of its first history book, it noted that it wanted to be like Skull and Bones at Yale. As we began to read deeper, it had another analogy in the story to Skull and Bones. It wasn't until we got the history book that the analogy that looked happenstantial in the story in the LA Times was actually deeper in the actual history book where they drew attention to Skull and Bones. It denoted that W.E.B. Du Bois was a member, and it began to describe people, influential people in the present-day society, and historically, our university, historically black college presidents are primarily coming out of this advisors to the king. And that word, that boule word, can be looked up in an encyclopedia, where now people don't use them, they use internet. And that's a dangerous thing, a dangerous dependency. But boule, B-O-U-L-E, the Greek version. There's a French version that's a coming together, a conclave, the AKA called their convention, the boule. But the Greek word is what we're looking for, the advisors to the king. The lower house of the Greek parliament is called boule. And if you know the American congressional system, Senate, 6 years, more power, authority, only 100, 2 per state. Congress, 435, have to run every 2 years. Your lower house has less power and authority. So it appears as if in finding the boule, that within it was a subordination to something else. And in its history book, it drew attention. Here's a logo. And this is their logo is a Grecian sphinx. It's an animal. And this Grecian sphinx is similar to a griffin or a gargoyle. Kind of ironically, the boule had their convention in Los Angeles in 1941. And where else? Griffin Park. And this logo, this symbol, is a guardian animal. This would be similar to a Rottweiler or a dog or a German Shepherd. They tend to protect something higher than itself. So there was this thing they went through, a born man versus the made man. The born man, the king and the queens of Europe, had to deputize people to colonize the lands, the Columbuses and the Cecil Rhodeses who went to Africa. They weren't the aristocracy, but they fought to be gladiators and colonists and explorers. The Lewis and Clark, who were Masons, these men used the societies to advance the wishes of the ruling class, and they set up a system, a circle within a circle, within another circle. Each circle protected the circle within it. So when you look to that boule logo, you see there's an urn. There's an animal with the wing of the bird, the tail of a lion, and it's got an urn, and it's got its paw over the urn, and it says in the history book number 2 by Hobart Jerry that in the urn are the names of the people who are chosen to lead the state, which suggests that part of the society function is not to make known who the people of power and authority are. There is a web. There is a web. They're sports. They're the media. They're education. They're social service. They're astronauts. They're the church. They are all of that. They are the secret societies too. And they all work in a loose-knit fashion, and they keep disagreements within a manageable limit.
Cultivating and enforcing the propagandistic agenda deriving from the Freemasonry logic formatted belief system of eugenics that blacks came from Africa. Log on to patreon.com.
Particular black secret society that we'll talk about today is the first of the black Greek societies. Started in 1904, and that word that you said, boule, is actually an acronym. It's a Sigma Pi Phi. Sigma Pi Phi, 1904 in Philadelphia. And for most of our people, we are not prepped to the responsibility of secret society in the American society. And this founding constitution, this illegal criminal enterprise, was a Masonic affair. And a Masonry is a form of secret society. There are other well-known secret societies like Skull and Bones at Yale, of which this corrupt president and his father were members of. And it is that society that the black society modeled itself after. So when they wrote their first history book, The History of Sigma Pi Phi, by a very noted black author, university president Charles Wesley, who wrote the history book for the Elks, the Prince Hall Masons, National Council of Negro Women, Alpha Phi Alpha, and Sigma Pi Phi. And as a result, in there, in page 28 of its first history book, it noted that it wanted to be like Skull and Bones at Yale. As we began to read deeper, it had another analogy in the story to Skull and Bones. It wasn't until we got the history book that the analogy that looked happenstantial in the story in the LA Times was actually deeper in the actual history book, where they drew attention to Skull and Bones. It denoted that W.E.B. Du Bois was a member, and it began to describe people, influential people in the present-day society, and historically, our university, historically black college presidents are primarily coming out of this advisors to the king. And that word, that boule word, can be looked up in an encyclopedia, where now people don't use them, they use internet. And that's a dangerous thing, a dangerous dependency. But boule, B-O-U-L-E, the Greek version. There's a French version that's a coming together, a conclave, the AKA called their convention, the boule. But the Greek words, what we're looking for, the advisors to the king, the lower house of the Greek parliament is called boule. And if you know the American congressional system, Senate, 6 years, more power, authority, only 100, 2 per state. Congress, 435, have to run every 2 years. Your lower house has less power and authority. So it appears as if, in finding the boule, that within it was a subordination to something else. And in its history book, it drew attention. Here's a logo. And this is their logo is a Grecian sphinx. It's an animal. And this Grecian sphinx is similar to a griffin or a gargoyle. Kind of ironically, the boule had their convention in Los Angeles in 1941. And where else? Griffin Park. And this logo, this symbol, is a guardian animal. This would be similar to a Rottweiler or a dog or a German Shepherd. They tend to protect something higher than itself. So there was this thing they went through, a born man versus the made man. The born man, the king and the queens of Europe, had to deputize people to colonize the lands, the Columbuses and the Cecil Rhodeses who went to Africa. They weren't the aristocracy, but they fought to be gladiators and colonists and explorers. The Lewis and Clark, who were Masons, these men used the societies to advance the wishes of the ruling class, and they set up a system, a circle within a circle, within another circle. Each circle protected the circle within it. So when you look to that boule logo, you see there's an urn. There's an animal with the wing of the bird, the tail of a lion, and it's got an urn, and it's got its paw over the urn, and it says in the history book #2 by W.R.T that in the urn are the names of the people who are chosen to lead the state, which suggests that part of the society function is not to make known who the people of power and authority are. There is a web. There is a web. They're sports. They're the media. their education, their social service, their astronauts, they're the church. They are all of that. They are the secret societies too, and they all work in a loose-knit fashion, and they keep disagreements within a manageable limit.
Cultivating and enforcing the propagandic agenda deriving from the Freemasonry logic formatted belief system of eugenics that blacks came from Africa.
I have no African descendant in my blood. I'm a Native American. So literally, I'm a Cherokee, I'm a Blackfoot, I'm a Red-tailed Indian. That's what's in my blood. A lot of people in America is indigenous people. You're not from Africa.
One of the darkest secrets and biggest mistakes ever made in American history was engendered by a copper-colored man by influencing fellow copper-colored men and women to deem themselves as African American. The illusory term derived from a narcissistic reverend turned presidential candidate in the year of 1988. While campaigning for the advancement of his political position, Reverend Jesse Jackson held a formal news conference to urge all Americans to utilize the term African Americans when referring to copper-colored citizens of America. In an interview about the term African American, Jackson stated, quote, "It puts us in our proper historical context. Every ethnic group in this country has a reference to some land base, some historical culture base. African Americans have hit that level of cultural maturity." The term African American, to refer to all people of color, was endorsed only since 1988, but was against the desires of the majority of the people of color. In fact, the term was endorsed by only 5 people, including Reverend Jesse Jackson and Ramona Etlin leading the charge, as a result of a gathering called the African American Summit, without the input of the majority of the people of color in America. Author Avis J. Smith went to the district court in Washington, D.C. to stand against this term, as well as against the notion that a small group of powerful individuals should be able to compel the masses into adopting it. So, who sanctions language? Who creates and enforces the wording that we use day in and day out? And do these people actually have the authority to do so? Because here's the problem with that. The term African American is not a legal form of racial classification. As a matter of fact, neither is black. Both terms were promoted as if it would make the American colored people feel equal to those that are classified as white by the census. The so-called blacks or the so-called African Americans are the only ones that actually believes that the 13th or 14th Amendments were established into the Constitution in their favor. But yet, neither amendment clearly mentions anything about blacks or African Americans being granted citizenship to this country, nor full rights as an American citizen should have. I have shared full details concerning this information in my videos called The Untold Truth About the Term Black, Part 1 and Part 2, but I mention all of this as a warning to inform you that both terms, black and African American, literally does not have any standing in law still to this very day. In fact, coloreds or Negroes are the only people who were not lawfully allowed to learn anything before and sometime after their enslavement, except for the industrialized religious belief system of the many denominations of Christianity that was brought to the ports of our lands by the Europeans in the 17th century. Speaking of Europeans, the original definition of the term American is described in the Webster's Dictionary in 1828 as, quote, "a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America." The aboriginals are also the only people in this country who were dehumanized by what is called the law of the land. The entire world benefited from the enslavement of the indigenous aboriginals. And still to this very day, those people that have benefited from the enslavement of our ancestors has said and did absolutely nothing about it systematically. So when they tell you to go back to Africa, is it because they want this land all for themselves? Is that what they mean by making America great again? Or is it because the U.S. Census defines the classification of white as a person with origins of either Europe, the Middle East, or of North Africa? And that's where they originally derived from. So who should be called African American now? I'm just here to make you think.
What's better than getting one order of boneless wings?
Log on to patreon.com/Dane Calloway or paypal.me/Dane Calloway to support me, my channel, and my content. Any amount is very much appreciated, and I humbly thank you.
It's really important for us to remember our history. The Irish, who left behind a land of famine. The Germans, who fled persecution. The Scandinavians, who arrived eager to pioneer out west. The Polish, the Russians, the Italians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the West Indians, the huddled masses who came through Ellis Island on one coast and Angel Island on the other. Now, unless you're one of the first Americans, a Native American, you came from someplace else. Somebody brought you. All those folks, before they were us, they were them.
In today's world, millions of Aborigines of America are settling for a complex description of their historical ethnicity, based solely on the fictitious thoughts of particular key individuals who were assigned with the responsibility of allegedly documenting a resident's race, color, and genealogy. These individuals were entitled as census enumerators, also known as census takers, which are federal government unsupervised employees who allegedly went from town to town, city to city, and door to door, deciding who was of what race and documented the families they meet as such. The census enumerators had a mammoth amount of influence on our genealogy records, still to this very day. In fact, what they informally documented on a sheet of paper was literally based on their mere individual opinions, and then later deemed as official records that were sacrosanct, leading to hundreds of years of the census takers' ideas of race being considered as official historical records of information. Make note of this very important fact. These census takers were provided instructions, and they recorded the ethnic category of various family members based on their perception of the family when they visited. So if you are attempting to find and interpret data about your family's history, these results can be confusing, especially if in one census they are deemed as all other free persons or slaves, and then free persons of color, then mulatto, and even black. In most early census years, there were no categories for Indian at all, while in others, free people of color were recorded in one group. Most census of today's society are skipping the classification of race altogether, leaving that particular portion blank for people of light to mid and dark brown skin complexion. So, where your family fell into a race classification category was solely up to the individual census taker of that particular area, not your family members. The complexity of census records are in fact outrageously discombobulating, but still very utilitarian for research purposes and enthralling nonetheless. During the early year of 1790, Congress assigned the full responsibility of census taking to the marshals of the U.S. judicial districts under an act that governed census taking through the years of 1790 to 1840. It was then called the 1790 Census Act, having been signed by then President George Washington, Vice President John Adams, and Speaker of the House Frederick Muhlenberg on March 1st, 1790. During that time period, there were many open political debates about who should be counted, and should slaves be counted as equal to the same as free whites. There was an economic structure already in place to this entire governmental construct that was not limited to taxation, which sparked a debate with the Northerners wanting slaves to be counted as equivalent of free whites, as the Southerners did not. Eventually, there was a compromise established, and August 2nd, 1790 marked the date of the official census day. According to the Census Bureau, the 1790 law required that, quote, every household be visited, that completed census schedules be posted in 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction, there to remain for the inspection of all concerned, and that the aggregate amount of each description of persons for every district be transmitted to the President. Census enumerators were required to record a total of 6 inquiries in the 1790 census, calling for the names of the head of the family and the number of persons in each household of the following descriptions: free white males 16 years and older, free white males under 16 years old, free white females, all other free, and slaves. The marshals were instructed to identify free white males by age brackets. It was noted that this tactic was designed to determine the country's industrial and military capabilities. Whomever refused to answer the enumerator's questions were assessed a hefty $25 fine. Under the general direction of then Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, the marshals took the census in the original 13 states, plus the districts of Kentucky, Maine, Vermont, and Tennessee. Both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson expressed skepticism over the final count, expecting a number that exceeded the 3.9 million inhabitants counted in the census. What is also important to note, there were various census instructions given to the census takers concerning Indians during the early 1790s and throughout the 1800s. In the 1790s, census takers were notified of specifications stating, quote, omitting Indians not taxed, distinguishing free persons, including those bound to service, from all others. During the year of 1800, instructions were slightly adjusted, stating that Indians living off of reservations and not, quote, wild, would have been recorded in the, quote, all other free persons column on the census form. The classification options were free white, slave, and all other free persons, just adding the word persons to the already established term all other free used on the 1790 census. Interesting enough, The Indians living in the, quote, wild, generally meaning plains, and the Indians in the West, or on reservations, were not taxed, but those who were enumerated were recorded in the, quote, all other free column on the 1790 census. Once the Constitution called for a census of all, quote, persons excluding Indians not taxed, many other adjustments were made to the classifications taken by the enumerators, mainly due to the sole purpose of apportioning seats in the House of Representatives and assessing direct federal taxes. On March 2nd, 1807, President Thomas Jefferson signed the act to prohibit the importation of slaves into any port or place within the jurisdiction of the United States. This act deemed it unlawful to, quote, import or bring into the United States or the territories thereof from any foreign kingdom, place, or country any Negro, mulatto, or person of color with intent to hold, sell, or dispose of such Negro, mulatto, or person of color as a slave or to be held to service of labor. This act came into effect as of January 1st, 1808 and beyond. Keep in mind that these familiar terms that I just mentioned, like Negro, mulatto, and person of color, were not used as official classifications of race on the census during this time period. In fact, in the year of 1810, there were very few adjustments made to the third census, making Indians living off of the reservations recorded in the, quote, all others column of the census form. This time around, the options were, quote, free white, slave, and all other, in replacement for the 1790 and 1800 census option, all other free persons. Soon after that, the War of 1812 made American history. It was a war declared by then President James Madison because of the discovery of Great Britain supporting many Indians with rebelling against white settlers in America. This war between the United States and Great Britain lasted until the year of 1815, and I'll be sure to produce a documentary about this topic at a later time. Moving forward into the year of 1820, the census made some critical adjustments to the classifications of race on their forms. This time, the Indians that were living off of reservations were recorded in the, quote, free colored persons category. Note that this is the first time ever recorded by the census utilizing the term colored. Other options included on the form were free whites, slaves, and all others except Indians not taxed. So generally speaking, the Indians not taxed is referring to the Indians living on reservations under the aid and care of government agents or roaming individuals or in bands over settled tracts of the country. According to Webster's Dictionary of the year 1828, the word American is a noun, with the definition being, quote, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. On March 4th, 1829, Andrew Jackson began his presidency in the White House. Then February 22nd, 1830, Senator Hugh White proposed a bill from the Committee on Indian Affairs called the Indian Removal Act. According to the LOC, the Indian Removal Act was signed into law by President Andrew Jackson on May 28, 1830, authorizing the president to grant unsettled lands west of the Mississippi in exchange for Indian lands within existing state borders. A few tribes went peacefully, but many resisted the relocation policy. I go into full detail concerning the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears in this video I will link above. If you did not see that link on the screen, you may check the link in the description section of this video as well to learn more. I highly recommend you do so. By the 1850 census, another change took place whereas the categories for race were now white, black, and mulatto. What is very important to note, if a person looked light, mid, or dark brown and was an Indian, the census takers recorded them as M for mulatto. According to Webster's Dictionary of the year 1828, mulatto is defined as, quote, a person that is the offspring of a negress by a white man or of a white woman by a Negro.
And that's what I thought. It's really an exercise in counting before I started to do research. And I started to look back since 1790 of how we counted Americans along racial and ethnic lines. And back then it was color. In 1850, we had a category mulatto to try to capture the amount of racial mixing. Between blacks and whites. In 1890, I believe, they added octoroon and quadroon to try to get at precise racial mixtures between blacks and whites. They actually dropped that altogether and just used black for anyone with any trace of black ancestry, and hence this idea of the one-drop rule, which has stayed so pervasive in the minds of Americans of who is black, and hence this idea of the one-drop rule, which has stayed so pervasive in the minds of Americans of who is black. And so as a result of all these practices, I think Americans have become very attuned to identifying blackness and constraining that racial category in ways.
They were instructed to be, quote, particularly careful to distinguish between blacks, mulattoes, quadroons, and octoroons. The word black should be used to describe those persons who have 3/4 or more of black blood. Mulatto, the persons who have from 3/8 to 5/8 black blood. Quadroon, those persons who have 1/4 black blood. And octoroon, those persons who have 1/8 or any trace of black blood. Confusing, right? How did they able... let me keep going. How did they able... let me keep going. In one of my previous videos called The Untold Truth About the $5 Indians, I stated that the U.S. government created a separate freedmen's list specifically designed to rule out all copper-colored Indians from receiving any newly established benefits and land allotments. Now, shortly after that, the U.S. government listed all full-blooded indigenous aborigines of America as black or colored as their classification of race documented inside of the 1900 census, while simultaneously, white U.S. citizens were allowed to become identified as Indians by merely paying the Dawes Commission a whopping total of just $5 for each white adult and child to be listed on the Dawes roll. So now, from the late 1880s to April 1st, 1902, public notices were passed around detailing that other, quote, claimants can legally make their cases for freedmen enrollment. This motion single-handedly allowed all white citizens the rights to legally cede Indian lands of America, reparations, plus the optimized benefits having been set in stone by way of many previous U.S. and Indian treaties. Now, jumping over to the 1930 census, it gave instructions to the census taker stating, Negroes, a person of mixed white and Negro blood should be returned as a Negro, no matter how small the percentage of Negro blood. Both black and mulatto persons are to be returned as Negroes without distinction. A person of mixed Indian and Negro blood should be returned as Negro unless the Indian blood predominates and the status as Indian is generally accepted in the community. And then it goes on to say, Indians, a person of mixed white and Indian blood, should be returned as Indian. At this time, I want to state some critically important information that millions of so-called African Americans need to know about because, of course, it won't be talked about. Going back to the year of 1861, black and white northern abolitionists pushed for the creation of a freedmen's bank. Now, these banks were said to have helped former slaves with developing positive habits of financial responsibility, while allegedly assisting their transition from slavery to freedom. So 4 years later, on the date of March 3rd, 1865, Congress created the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company, which was later referred to as the Freedmen's Bank. According to historical records, President Lincoln immediately signed the bill into law. Deposits were received only, quote, by or on behalf of persons heretofore held in slavery in the United States or their descendants. Up to 7% interest was allowed for deposits, and any unclaimed accounts were to be pooled into a charitable fund that was used to educate children of former slaves, allegedly. In 1868, the bank headquarters was moved to Washington, D.C., where black staffers were trained to overtake its operations. At its peak, the bank operated 37 branches in 17 different states and the District of Columbia, making it one of the first multi-state banks in the nation. And by 1870, nearly all of the local branches were operated by copper-colored Aborigines. Frederick Douglass, who was elected president in 1874, donated tens of thousands of dollars of his own funds to the institution, but due to some alleged fraudulent activity amongst the bank's upper management and the board of directors, the bank was forced to close officially on June 29, 1874. Now, in my opinion, I feel as though that was a malicious, manipulated story designed to have reason to close all 37 branches of the Freedmen's Banks. I wouldn't put it past the jealous government of a corporation anyway. Furthermore, at the date of closing, get this, nearly $3 million was owed to 61,144 depositors. Now, adjusting these numbers for inflation, that's nearly $57.8 million and over 70,000 depositors. Concerning this matter, I'll be sure to go into full detail in a later documentary, but I stated all of this to inform you that the records of those accounts are located in the National Archives still to this very day, and those records also included very useful information like one's first name and last name given, their date of birth, their location of birth, their current residence of that time period.
John Hope Bryant. There's a book coming out called The Memo, and he talks about the memo that black people never got. Lincoln created the Freedmen's Bank right across from the White House. He gets killed 2 months after his creation. Then pretty much he withers on the vine. Frederick Douglass put the equivalent of $20 million today into the Freedmen's Bank.
Their alleged classification of race and many other useful historical resources that is not commonly known to the public. In conclusion, I want to show you what classification of race slaves were deemed as such during the late 1700s, prior to the census existence. While diligently researching about this topic, I managed to purchase some authentic historical documents, one of which is an advertisement from a 1750 newspaper describing a runaway slave being scouted for return by his master. He was described as a mulatto fellow. Mulatto, not mulatto. No mention of being a Negro, black, nor of African descent. Now, I know what you're going to ask. Was he an Indian? And my answer to that is, yes, he was. And a full-blooded Indian, to be exact. just here to make you think. Log on to patreon.com/Dane Calloway or paypal.me/Dane Calloway to support me, my channel, and my content. Any amount is very much appreciated, and I humbly thank you.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. But you never find a white aborigine. Rather, aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines, but you don't want to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American.
This means, in the case of an American Negro, it comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you, that the Indians were you. Indians were you.
I was up in Pine Ridge with Russell Means at the Sundance. I took my wife and my son. My son knew how to go in the wilderness and build a tent where they stayed. I watched my wife. They put a blanket over her arm because she has Indian roots. And they danced. My wife had never danced. But there she was with the women in the circle of the Sioux Oglala Nation. And I watched my wife reach down in her roots, and you could not tell that she was not one of the Oglala Sioux women as she danced with them, as she danced with them, as she danced with them.
After the Civil War ended in the early 1800s, Oklahoma became the resettlement destination for 40 to 90 Southern Indian tribes, clans, and or nations alike. By unofficial orders from then-President Andrew Jackson, he deliberately initiated the immigration with an E of Native Indians from their respective territories throughout all of the lands east of the Mississippi River to the westlands of the Mississippi River. Having started with the Turtle Clan in 1817, then called the Lochapoka, and then next were some members of the Muskogee Clan from 1819 to 1829, later known as the Creek Nation, in which they were all natives of the lands of both Alabama and Georgia. Even though most of the tribes left and moved peacefully, some of the members, along with other Indian tribes, resisted to go, so they stayed home. Some copper-colored Indians left because they didn't want to be faced with the possibility of being enslaved, while others stayed home because they did not want to abandon their sacred lands or their original inhabitants. From the year 1817 to 1836, the most commonly known Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole tribes not to exclude the more uncommonly known many other Indian nations of the southeast regions of America, were all affected by President Jackson's malicious integration of immigration with an E, and they too moved west, resettling all over the state of Oklahoma. The more commonly known signs of resistance came from the most recently established Cherokee tribe, originally known as the Ani-Young-Wea tribe of the Great Lakes. They later moved to much larger areas of landmass, stretching throughout the southernmost regions of North America. According to historical records, these group of native Indians were called the Salagi tribe before the late 1700s, a detached tribe of the Iroquoian family. It's an open secret that the term Cherokee is a Creek word, meaning people who spoke a different language. The Salagi later adopted Cherokee as their new tribal name during the 1820s, while simultaneously revamping themselves by creating their own new form of tribal government based on the United States laws and regulations. This was all done to counteract against ceding their full territory. Rather than being governed by a traditional tribal council, the newly established Cherokees wrote a constitution and created a two-house legislature. They learned to speak English by their fellow copper-colored brothers and sisters, and they also created a Cherokee syllabary to form their own written language, called the Cherokee language, in the early 1820s. Christianity was adopted as the religion that propelled the tribe to be considered a, quote, civilized tribe, due to them replacing their very own cultures with white European cultures. Quietly, lots of these decisions were made without the direct consent of the full-blooded Cherokee leaders. In the year of 1827, the state of Georgia began the process of demanding the U.S. government to forcefully remove the Cherokee Nation from its lands of the state. The Cherokee Nation emphasized the assimilation of its culture and sent yearly delegations to Washington to lobby on their behalf. But when the tribe wrote its constitution earlier in 1827, the Georgia government saw the move as an assertion of Cherokee sovereignty, whereas the tribe could become an independent nation within the state of Georgia. This form of bravery rubbed off Senator Hugh White the wrong way. On the date of February 22nd, 1830, Hugh White proposed a bill from the Committee on Indian Affairs called the Indian Removal Act to provide for, quote, any exchange of lands with the Indians residing in any of the states or territories. According to the LOC, the Indian Removal Act was passed by the House and the Senate in the same day of May 26, 1830, then immediately signed into law by President Jackson just 2 days later. This sole authorization made it official for President Andrew Jackson to grant unsettled lands to the native Indians in exchange for their current Indian territories. So in response to this motion, the Cherokees took legal action in an attempt to save their lands. In their second most recent Supreme Court case, Worcester versus Georgia in 1832, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that the Cherokee Nation was entitled to federal protection over those of the state laws of Georgia. The court ruled that the Indian Nation was a, quote, distinct community in which the laws of Georgia can have no force, and into which Georgians could not enter without the permission of the Cherokees themselves, or in conformity with treaties. In spite of then Chief Justice Marshall ruling in favor of the Indians, the state of Georgia and President Jackson forced the Indian nations to cede approximately 8 million acres of their land to the United States government. making their new Indian territory the lands of Oklahoma and some westlands of Arkansas and Missouri. By the time the Indian Removal Act of 1813 was signed into law by President Jackson, the United States government managed to purloin the original Indian territories of Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, West Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, and many other southern states. The Treaty of New Echota, negotiated in 1835 and signed in 1836, was made by a small contingent of Cherokees led by John Ridge against the wishes of the majority of the tribe and its leader, Chief John Ross. John Ridge was later assassinated on June 22, 1839, as a result of the Cherokees having to forcefully cede their lands and unwillingly relocate, traveling some 800 miles to the Oklahoma Territory. Over time, this journey became known as the Trail of Tears. Imagine, if you will, a peaceful day of life during the evening hours of a frigid month of November. Daydreaming about the week ahead, while simultaneously contemplating at the warm fireplace nearby inside your home. Then you begin to visualize a hearty dinner plate while sitting at your dining room table, accompanied by your ever-so-loved immediate family members. Your wife addresses you with a kiss as she sits your well-prepared meal onto the table. Without question, you respond to her benevolently, stating, "Thank you, my dear," with such humbled grace and mercy. All thoughts and wonders are removed from your mindset as you begin to eat. You strike bright smiles at the hilarious conversations your children are presenting. You take a deep breath and look over to your wife and state that you love her. As time went on, while enjoying your beautiful family togetherness, you're abruptly rudely interrupted. White law officials carelessly strutted into your home by helping themselves through your unlocked front door. "This house and its surrounding land has been deemed property of the state of Georgia," said one white law official. "You must leave at once, for we are here to evict you and your family from these lands immediately." Submitting to their orders, you find yourself outside in frigid weather conditions, barefooted, surrounded by your fellow tribal members, thousands of your red and copper-colored brothers and sisters of the tribe. Even the ones who were enslaved by the tribe were forced to tag along. With snow and ice on the ground, and the women of the tribe whimpering constantly, you try to keep a positive attitude and show signs of strength to motivate everyone else to keep walking, walking, and more walking. Some young and many of the fragile elders dropped violently to the snow-covered grounds. You immediately tend to their needs, but unfortunately, they can't be met, for it is too late to save them from the many deadly illnesses that arise. You desperately hope this journey will end sooner than a week, but then a week turned into months, and those months accumulated well into hundreds of miles of walking throughout all types of unbearable climate changes, and many thoughts of giving up hope that you will ever make it to the westlands of the Mississippi River, as you are rapidly losing weight, supplies, food, family, and tribal members. You tried your best not to, but you couldn't hold back those tears any longer.
If you you were to walk into any mosque in America and you just laid your hands on the first person or the third person or the fifth person that you see, you realize that you're laying your hands on the Native American.
I believe
There were only 8% of the slaves that came to America. So how is it that there's so many more people that they claim are black or African Americans? I think they got the numbers wrong, because a lot of Native Americans are the ones that they're counting as black folks too. As black folks too. As black folks too.
I'm just here to make you think.
Yes, family, what's up? This is Netalex L with another video. You know, goal is always to vibrate high, family. Vibrate as high as the sun. Vibrate on the same frequency as Mother Earth, that 432. My brothers and sisters, family, the world, all right? This is what the moment that you've been waiting for. The full interview with Brother Hemak from NAAIP, all right? A lot of people had questions. A lot of people wanted some things clarified. And I took it upon myself on behalf of you to go to the brother wherever he was at to do an interview. So I hope you enjoy it. Please, 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 family, spread this video, because we have until September to get as much claims in as possible. Get your nationality card so you could claim your identity, and also so you could do your trust. All right? Again, I love you, and that's why I do what I do. I'm just so honored, and I'm grateful, and I'm humble, okay, that the Most High could use me in such a way on behalf of my ancestors and behalf of the people. So once again, enjoy, and please share the video, make it go viral. All right? I love y'all. Peace.
So what's up, family? This is Netalex L here again with another video. As promised, I'm meeting with Brother Hemak from NAAIP, and you know what day it is. All right, we're about to bring the drop. All right, so you guys emailed a lot of questions, and the brother is here in person, and let's get it on. So my brother, first let me just say thank you for doing this. I gotta say, my first experience when I first saw you, I saw you on Sister Taylor. Yeah, Sister Taylor's video, and my spirit, connected with yours, because I said to myself, you know what, I want to meet that brother right there. You know what I mean? Like he's real. Like that's what my spirit told me, and I just put everything into the universe, and that's what brought us here today. And it was kind of at first a little bit rocky at the beginning, and again, I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't to question your integrity. You know what I'm saying? But more so just people asking me questions, and I didn't even have the answers. So you know what I mean? So I wanted to try to get at you to try to, get me to, get to the people. So that's pretty much what this is, all about. So I really appreciate that. All right? Very good. All right. So one of the first questions somebody emailed me was, it says that on my old birth certificate, it has me as Negro. Also my parents. Can the old birth certificate be used? And that's in terms of getting the nationality.
If you don't mind, before I answer that question, let me properly introduce myself to your viewers.
Okay, I apologize.
I am Hemak Sheila, Director General for the National Association for the Advancement of Indigenous People International. And we've invited this brother here to our temporary office here in Providence, and we're pleased that he had enough interest and enough desire and energy to make it to this place, so that we could share whatever it is that that he's looking to be shared, and we will be quite candid.
Appreciate that. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So so I love that prelude. All right. So quick question, right? Even before I get into all that, right? I know NAAIP, right? Exactly what is it about? Like, what is the purpose of forming this? What is it called? An organization, association?
NAACP is an institution.
Okay.
NAACP was formed and created, came into existence from my tribe, the Choctaw Nation, out of West Tennessee. We were having such a problem in defending our rights and implementing our rights with the local government that we decided we should form some form of structure, put a structure in place that could enjoin relationships with other tribes, other groups, indigenous groups, thereby allowing us a different level of protection. And that's based off of a number of things. When you're known to be an Indian in the United States as a part of their structure, when you're known to be an Indian, not one that's recognized based on some paper provided by the federal government, but when you're recognized in your neighborhood, in your community as an Indian, then you are an Indian under U.S. law.
Okay.
These are things that are not expressed and shared necessarily with the agencies at the state and at the local level. So NAACP was formed as an institution that would help my personal tribe, Choctaw, gain a better footing in implementing the rights that we believe we had a right to in West Tennessee. And from that initial move, we had no idea that NAACP would continue to grow and grow from tribe to tribe, from Indian or indigenous person to the next indigenous person, until it's become now an international institution that's no longer focused on the Choctaw Nation. Okay. It's focused on many nations, many nations. You know, so this is where NAACP has come from, and where we're going will be determined by what we do.
Okay.
In these days and weeks and months to come.
Okay. So would you say that it's about getting a nationality, or acknowledging your nationality, or getting back your birthright? Is that the same, or is it two different things?
It's all lumped up in one shell.
Okay.
It's identity.
Okay.
Identity is the answer to so much, to so many things. I was watching a video the other day of this lady. She was talking about she and her sister, one sister looking white and the other one not, and that sort of thing. And based on how her sister looked, her sister got a different reaction from the clerks in the stores, and that sort of thing. Okay. That's identity. Now, you look at the complexion and you just automatically assume, well, we have to establish diversity knowledge and education within this structure, because the Indians in this country are not identified by this, because we come in shades that look like you, and shades that look like Tonto from the Lone Ranger. Right. And people that look like the Lone Ranger himself are recognized today as Indians. So it can't be judged longer by the texture and the color, the hue of someone's skin. It's deeper. It goes to the heritage. Where do your records show that you come from? And in this particular instance, we've initiated a process where it's focused on colored birth certificates, because Congress accidentally opened their door too soon. What I mean by too soon is the deadline for making claims against the United States has come to a certain position and closed in a lot of ways. So Congress felt it free to say coloreds are American Indians, because nobody can do anything about it anymore. Okay. Well, that was unfortunate for Congress, because there's a lot that can be done through this institution, NAACP.
Okay.
So because of the structure that's been put in place by recognizing 8 tribes, purely based on them having nothing but a birth certificate that said colored, Congress approved those 8 tribes for recognition, for federal recognition. Okay. So we're talking no other documentation, no historical records like have been presented by so many tribes and groups across the country, but a colored birth certificate. And we're finding that there are thousands of Indians, those who call themselves and recognize in the community as Indians, have colored birth certificates. So many people that look like Donald Trump with grandmothers with colored birth certificates and Negro birth certificates, but they look like Donald Trump, but their grandparents look like you. So it's about identity, and we must bring the identity issue to the top of the ladder, because without that, we don't get any change in education, in health, in general life, period, in the United States for people of color. Because there's such a confusion about the people, and that was done deliberately. By bringing over a few 100,000 dark people from the Caribbean islands and possibly from the continent by way of the Caribbean islands, bringing them here to these lands, creating this facade of everybody coming from the motherland instead of being from here. So there is created a massive ball of confusion, and this is not what they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to solidify this, that the Negro and the black man, they're from Africa, accepted a long time ago, but it wasn't accepted as much as they tried to create it into acceptance through the Pan-Africanism. But so it's about identity. It's strictly about identity. Everything that we experience, black folk, lack of a term, white folk in this country, it's about identity. It's all about identity. They have no valid identity. When I say they, I'm speaking about the European. So he knows that she does not have that solid identity to these lands. That's a problem for him because he's invested so much in these lands. That creates a massive problem financially and emotionally for him. So he's not willing to let that go. So we're talking about chaos as we proceed. This is not what I want. This is not what the United Nations wants. This is not what the president wants. These things are kept secret and quiet for a particular reason. But then I'm being allowed to do what it is that I'm doing because I'm being manipulated too. You understand?
I appreciate that.
And I don't mean I'm being manipulated by the system. Because the system is saying that we're about to have some idiots in the White House. So I have to say, do I want to succumb under those idiots? Or do I want to speak my mind now and take the bullet now? I'd rather speak my mind now. Yes. And not be encroached by Hillary, whom I fought with before. And that other, the clown, his name.
Yeah, we know.
Yes. So please,
hit
me with these questions.
All right. So yeah, the first one was on my old birth certificate. It has me as Negro and also my parents. Can my old birth certificate be used?
The old birth certificate can be used if you're from, specifically, we found Choctaw territory. The Choctaw Treaty of 1865 and 1866 specifically speaks of the Negro and the rights of the Negro that exist in Choctaw territory. So it depends on whether or not your people are from what was considered Choctaw territory in 1865 and 1866 as to whether or not there's a land claim for Negro for them in those particular territories. But because of the fact that they have Negro on their birth certificates, are they Negro?
I don't know, are they?
But what is a Negro?
True.
What is a black man? What is a colored man?
African American.
No, I don't. Yeah, you see?
Right, okay.
So who gave that designation to your parents to call them Negro? Is that what they wanted to be placed on their documents? Is that how they identified themselves? Or was it just placed there? If it was just placed there, and in many cases we have no way of knowing, but if it was just placed there, then that's fraud. That's identity theft. Because whoever placed it there gave your parents a false identification, a commercial identification, based off a commercial construct in law within the United States, and labeled them as property, as a Negro. Not as an Onondaga, not as a Yamasi, not as a Chalagi or Pokanoket, but as a Negro. Yes.
So if that, that Negro birth certificate doesn't necessarily lead to a particular tribe, so is there like another way of going around it, or?
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Negro in law in this country existed pre-slavery. Now, if there was no slavery, but Negro existed in law, that means that we have a claim back to when Negro was used in law.
Okay.
And from that period, we're talking about genocide, apartheid, we're talking about all types of violations, human rights violations that have transpired with your Negro family if it's coming through these channels of creating the United States and its position today.
Okay.
So yes, there is a claim.
Okay.
There is a claim.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. I appreciate that. The next question is, I don't have the birth certificate of my parents, but on their marriage license it says Negro. So can that be used? Just without the birth certificate, but the license says Negro.
It doesn't matter if it's a death certificate, marriage certificate, school record, church record. Any documentation from any agency is considered from the agency.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, beautiful.
And let me say this. Be careful about the land area where the Negro was from at a particular time. Because even after a particular time, the word Negro just continued to spread across the country. Not meaning that these Negro were the same Negro. You see how they began to mix the pot?
Yeah.
Yes. So it's about location. It's about heritage, knowing that my grandmother or my great-grandmother lived in this particular county at such and such date. And during this particular time, in 18 whatever, this is who else lived there. And this is what was going on there. Because apples don't mix with grapes.
Right.
So you're not going to have a tribal group right here and another tribal group right here. They're going to be together. And if your folks were from that particular heritage or history, then those records will show that. One that's living in Choctaw County, Mississippi, there's a reason why Choctaw County was called Choctaw County. So let's find out when it became Choctaw County and why it became Choctaw County. And if my folks were there during that period, what were my folks doing there? So those seeds begin to lead. This is the only history that we have. True. The most concrete thing that we have is the colored designation. And let me say this about the colored designation. If my documents say colored, yours does not, and I'm reestablished, I adopt you.
Oh, okay.
I adopt you. You are now a part of my family with the same rights, the same conclusions as my other family members within that tribe.
Oh, okay.
So
there's always a means to make it happen.
There's always a means.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Cool. All right. Another question is, what will the advantage be of having claimed my nationality, or are there any disadvantages?
In Puerto Rico right now, it's falling apart. There are a lot of people here in America that are from that place called Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is slowly being inhabited. China and other countries are coming in, laying claim. Just like in Ethiopia, the same thing. And because you are a natural of Puerto Rico, likely to be Taino, by you coming forward to NAARP, and NAARP helping to facilitate your establishing your trust back to your natural land, you're now making an international claim of rights to those lands that this other country is coming in and claiming. And because these are your lands, by blood, you have a superior claim in international law, in the family of nations, the law of nations. So it brings you to a particular point where you can fight for those lands that you've placed under trust, protecting not for you, but for your people and you.
Okay.
Perpetual. So this is the benefit of becoming a member of NAARP. We work with internationals. We help internationals to concretely form their position within their society, wherever that society is.
Okay.
Not just America.
International.
International.
All right. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. This is another email. It says, is there any other way to get a membership besides providing the birth certificate? Oh, we already gone through that colored. You already explained that. It says, the next question is, once one become a member,
wait a minute. You presented that question a certain way. What was that question again?
Okay, well, it was another email. It says, is there any other way to get a membership besides providing a birth certificate that states one is colored or Negro?
Now, NAAIP does not require any birth certificate from anyone. We don't want to see that. That's not for us.
Oh, okay.
You simply make that the declaration that you are Aborigine or indigenous on the ancestry document. That's all we need.
Oh, okay. So
If
it's up to the individual to do their own
make their own self-declaration as to who they are.
Themselves, and then you just put a stamp on it.
Yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I'm not identifying them. They are self-identifying, which the United Nations allows them to do, self-identify.
So you're not doing the research for them. They have to do it for themselves.
There you go.
Okay, yes. They tell you who they are.
But beyond that, we facilitate so much more once they become members because we've done extensive research in the tribal and Aborigine arena for American Aborigine.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Beautiful. Once one becomes a member, is there a limit on how many people one can adopt into the organization?
Now, I think I understand that. Adopt into the organization. You mean
is she asking that maybe like herself, like her, can she adopt? She's part of the family. Can she adopt, let's say, a cousin who didn't do it? Can she adopt them, or would that you guys would have to do that?
She would not want to, she could not adopt anybody to NAAIP.
Oh, okay.
They would have to become a member.
Okay.
When members fill out this form, that's provided to them, the descendancy form for the settlement, that's pertaining to the commerce claim that was filed against the Commerce Department and against the IMF and certain banks in China that we're not at liberty to even talk about. But that's what that particular form is for individuals that are members, petitioners in that claim, meaning that they are subject to that claim, meaning that they suffered based on that claim and they chose to become a petitioner in that claim. Therefore, they are a petitioner and they can then bring their children, their mother, father, uncle, aunt, grandmother, grandfather, that type of thing. Yes, immediately. They could list their names in that settlement claim. Doesn't make those people members of NAAIP. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thanks. All right. So
let me, because just in case there was a reference to something else, maybe the trust. Once you become a member of NAAIP, you establish your trust. Your trust, ratified, constructive notice, do your business with Department of Energy, your constitution. You can adopt 50 million people into your tribe. It's totally your choice.
Okay. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. You understand?
Okay, I understand that.
Or 50 members of NAAIP who have their own trust can form a nation.
But still umbrellaed under NAAIP.
With the protection
that
put in place in 2014.
So, but you could still have it, but now with the tribe,
no governance from NAAIP whatsoever. Completely. I wish you the best.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But of course, if they want some guidance.
Yes, for sure. We're perpetually here for that.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. What rights does one have as a member? And I think in terms when they say rights, because what she actually was asking me was a lot of times, like the police officers could just come and pull you over and just you know what, take you to the station as a member or claiming your nationality, so to speak, as an indigenous. Are you still required or subjected to the laws of the corporation?
You can be, because the corporation has not been educated as to who you are. The corporation hasn't been educated through the implementation that's supposed to be in place under international law. It's necessary for NAAIP members to take notice of and document the things in their areas that need to be implemented under the rights. But first they must know what the rights are, which means that we have to spend the due diligence to read and understand the Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples. Then we have to access other UN Convention documents so that apply to us and learn those things so that when someone from NAAIP comes into your town, that we're not the only ones speaking implementation to the agencies. You understand your own rights because we're only there for a moment. You have to continue standing on that ground, so you need to know your rights. And so there's a massive effort that's underway. NAAIP is an institution, not a nation. But we are being treated as if we are a nation, not just by the membership, but by the international community. And we're not looking for that. That's not what we're looking for. We're nation builders. You understand? And as nation builders, we are helping to facilitate those nations in gaining their own sovereign protections under the law. You know, so we've taken on a very huge task that's not secluded to my tribe or my nation. It's nations all across the globe, and they're growing. So it's imperative that we understand that and take the position as members. Members need to look at themselves as if they were many nations coming to the United Nations asking for assistance. And NAAIP is helping them to facilitate those concerns that they have as indigenous clans, tribes, nations across the globe. That's who we are. So everybody, every member is a tribe. Every member is a nation. And once he does his own trust and puts it into action, it becomes a living document that protects his property and protects his family. His children become property of the trust. And currently they're property of the United States trust. So you take them from the U.S. and place them under your own heritage, your own bloodline trust, the way that it should be, the way that it is across the globe. So we're not doing anything new. We're just reminding our people that this is what we used to do. And because we're in a commercial environment, we must create the white paper to flow through their veins, to flow through their system, so that they can identify and recognize who we are. Because without that white paper being there, we don't exist. So it's crucial that we develop trust charters and place them on the record and set up our business mechanisms to operate under those trusts. We should not be setting up corporations, because when we do, we adhere ourselves to the rules and regulations of that corporation, which is a United States statute and all those other things that we do. And we should not be bringing that to our human body, to our sentient being. We shouldn't do that. With the trust, you don't have to do that. The trust becomes the mechanism that builds the world. How many human beings are called the United States? I don't know anybody named United States.
Right, true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But hell, it's got an army and got all these mechanisms that we can't walk out on the street without seeing the United States, because they're going to cruise by.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
But who is he? Who is she? He, she doesn't exist. It's a trust.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we have to create our own trust based on our heritage, where we come from. And if it's from these lands, then our trust is superior to the United States trust, because they got their trust from us, from the Onondaga, from the Great Law.
Okay. All right. Yes. All right. Understood. Next question, do members have regulations or laws that they have to follow or to abide by?
You know, I was having a discussion this morning about that, and I'll go back to NAAIP was formed by my tribe to help my tribe. And over the past 3 years, we've begun helping so many tribes. And this past year, it has just skyrocketed. It's an impossible task. It's a daunting task every day. It is. But we do it because it has to be done. And we've been thrust into a journey that we didn't ask for. But because Creator moves through me the way that he does, I can't let it go. I can't just grab my bags and grab my children and walk away and say, I'm covered. Like that. You know, NAAP is at a point, is at a true point in the international community that we can actually provide major component for correct